So I'm going to start, and thank you again for coming. My name is David Coe. I'm going to say my wife's here. The last time she heard me talk like this was over 30 years ago in Tokyo, and I had about 1 year of Japanese lessons, and I was giving a lecture on advanced physics to a Japanese audience. Hopefully today will be a bit easier than that. And she had a good laugh because I kept getting subtle Japanese things completely wrong, so I may still do that. So I want to talk to you today about a new approach to climate change. And I'd like to start by telling you a little bit more about myself. This year I turned 62, and my wife and I have been together for 37 years. And during this time, we've been married for 32 of them. And we have 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. And the oldest is turning 30 later this year, and the youngest is 14. So quite a spread along there. And over this time, I've worked in the finance industry for 30 years. I ran hedge funds. Before that, as you may gather from what I said earlier, I led advanced physics research. I had a position in Oxford University as a lecturer. And since COVID, I've been working with grassroots communities. And throughout, I've always been involved with catechism and prayer groups with teenagers and adults. So it's been quite a mix, and actually it's helped me to bring them together. And so why do we need a new approach? And the answer is because if you keep thinking of it as a crisis, as everybody talk about, and I'm sure you've had those days at work or at home when you're constantly firefighting, you just burn out. You either just completely burn out or you dissociate yourself completely. And neither of those things is good, because climate change is not going to go away. Disengaging ourselves completely from it is not good. Burning out because of it is also not good. So we have to have some other way of thinking about that. So if it's not going to be a crisis, then what is it? And it's helpful to just think back about what you may think climate change is. For the scientists, it's the greenhouse gases. These have the effect on the atmosphere like closing the window, a bit like this room at the moment. And the heat gets trapped, and very soon it gets quite uncomfortable. And in this case, the room is the whole planet, and the heat comes from the sun. And what happens is that as the heat accumulates up, the river's dry and the reservoir's dry, and you end up with drought. But it also causes a lot of flood. And that's because most of our planet is actually water. And the heat evaporates the water and makes clouds. And of course, what happens then with what goes up, it's got to come down, and you come down with a lot of rain. And so more heat, more rain, more flood. And in between the drought and the flood, you get storms, and they're more intense because there's more heat in there, so they move along a lot more. And that causes a lot of damage. And that costs us, because your roof gets blown off, or even if it's just a tile and everything else that goes on. And so there's an economic side to climate change. And for the economists, climate change is about oil and gas and coal. And the reason is because every time we use them, we release a little bit more of the greenhouse gases. So they go up and they close a tiny window a little bit more. And the problem is they don't go away, and so they accumulate, and eventually the whole of the little windows are closed up. But for the economist, the oil and gas and coal gives us energy. And we need that energy to make stuff. And we need to make stuff because our businesses need to sell us stuff. And they need to sell us stuff so they can make profits. And we need them to make profits because we need jobs. And our governments need us to have jobs so that we can pay taxes. And we need our governments to have the money so that they can support us, especially if we lose our jobs. So our whole life is cycled around these oil and gas and coal, and we can't get rid of them. It's actually a little bit worse than that, because the profits from the businesses actually goes into our pensions and our savings and help to top them up. And so they are also our future. And we can't actually think of our life without thinking about our retirement and what may happen then. And so that becomes a problem. We have to keep buying and selling stuff. And what does all that buying and selling actually do? is it leads to a broken relationship with nature. Every time we make our stuff to buy and sell, we have to take from somewhere. And so over the years, actually centuries, we've gone around into a mode of just take and take and take. And this nature that we take from is not just the animals and plants. It's actually all of creation. That's why I write it with a capital N. So that's all the lands and the seas and the animals and plants, but also us, our societies and our communities as well. And we have just stripped them bare as a result. And that's a consequence of our need for our jobs and all of those things. So it seems pretty damn impossible. It's worth asking, if you were nature, what would you think of it as? And I'd like to propose that, if I were nature, I want to think about it as actually the birth of a new future. Because our economy is already quite top-heavy, overladen, and it's kind of falling apart anyway. And climate change is just giving that little shove along. That's going to crack it open a bit more. And eventually it may just well collapse. And so if it does, there's going to be something there. And that something is that new future. So maybe the way we can think about climate change is actually the birthing contractions of a new future, which then takes you from thinking about panicking about the crisis to asking, what is the shape of the future you want? And for my wife and I, what we think of climate change is the things that give us joy. That's our children, their children if they have them, and also our ability and their ability to have a purposeful life. The point about the ability to purposeful life is that this is really something that people talk about for a very long time. Aristotle really talks about it, and he called it a eudaimonic life. And this is a life which has purpose and meaning, where you do not fear the hardship and the pain, but you can embrace them as being part of your journey towards fulfilling your mission. And that's the part where I like to think about. A little while ago, I was on a hike with some university students. They were in their third year. So we started talking about the future and jobs. And one of them was saying, I'm not sure about getting a job. I think I'm betraying myself. And we kind of talked a bit more and said, why? And she was saying, it's because I feel I have a mission. I don't know what that is, but I feel that I'm here. I'm meant to be doing something. And just getting a job where I'm going to be sitting in an office just feels like I'm going to be betraying that before I've even started to see what that might be. And I think today, in the job markets, where jobs are actually quite vulnerable, a lot more young people and young professionals are feeling that as well. What am I really giving up? What might be my sense of a mission for? And that's really important. Because that sense of mission, of being who you are, has nothing to do with being good. And we tend to think about it and say we must do some good thing. But that's because we are people and we tend to judge each other a lot. And nature doesn't judge. And the interesting thing about it is when you read about Noah and the story of Noah, it's about God saying, you know what, man had become so corrupt and evil, I'm going to wipe them all out and start again. Cancel the whole lot. And he built this great big ship and he found one. He said, oh, amazing, Noah, you're a righteous person, you're a good person. Tell you what, I'll rescue you. And at the end of the flood, he made a promise to Noah. And you'd think he'd say, be good and then you'll be fine. But no, he doesn't. He says, never again. Even though people will always have evil in their heart. And that means that it doesn't matter who you are, the world will always have a place for you. And if that's the case, it means it doesn't matter how the world is, you will always have a place in it. And that is important if we want to think about climate change, because we don't know how the world is going to be. And we fear what it might be, but what this is saying is that you will always have a place in it. Later on that walk, we got to Gatton Park. And there we saw these 10 stone pillars. And we didn't expect it, we just kind of came across it. And they were the Millennium Stones. They were put up at the year 2000, when it turned over. And on stone 8, it had an inscription. And he said, do not wish to be anything but what you are, and try to be that perfectly. And I said to the young woman I was walking along with, and sort of saying, you know what, this stone is written for you. He speaks completely and directly to what you were saying. And this is what I call our spiritual belonging. That there's something about us that we feel we're called to, and it doesn't matter how the world is, it's always going to be getting us out of bed in the morning. And that's important. Because with climate change, we can't really rely on any of the things that we're used to relying on, except the one thing that's a constant, which is who we are. And that's our spiritual belonging. So how do you use that? What can you do with it? Is spiritual belonging enough, sufficient in its way? And in a way, it's not. And I ended up thinking there are 3 pillars that you actually need. And the first, of course, is spiritual belonging. It's the thing that says if you're going to be a musician, you're always going to be attracted to music. If you're going to be a mathematician, you're always going to be fiddling around with like numbers and relationships. And that's what you're always going to do. But what that means is that in spite of all those disappointments and broken promises that we're going to meet in our journey forward, because climate change is going to shake everything up, our spiritual belonging is always going to get us out of bed in the morning. And I had a conversation yesterday with a man who has a business regrowing forests. And he's been through a lot of trouble and he's trying to make this work, and it's meant to be a for-profit kind of business along. And he was saying, you know what, this just keeps getting me out of bed in the morning, no matter how bad it gets. Because that's where spiritual belonging is. Now, what then do you need? Well, we need to eat, quite clearly. And it's no good saying, let them have cake in that case. So that's our problem that we have. And that's why our lives are torn, because we have this functional part that says we need to have food and we need to go and earn money in that way. So what we need is economic presence, which very simply is the realization of our spiritual belonging into a good living. So how can we do that? You have presence when people notice you. That's what it is. An actor has a presence that goes on stage and people notice them. A bad actor goes on stage and nobody sees them in that way. And why is that? It's because they give something to the audience. They give something to others. And this is really important, because if we want to survive, we can live on our own. But if we want to thrive, we have to have that connection with others. And that's why we need that presence. And in the world where everything is uncertain, you're going to get that by nourishing others. What happens then is they can reward you because of what you've done for them. And so you develop this economic exchange. But it's much more than economics. Because if you allow them to reward you, what you're saying is they have something that is useful for you. Which means that you give them the dignity of being someone who has something who can enrich you. And that's important, because otherwise, when we think about the way we make a living, that aspect of dignity never appears. But by allowing others to have that, what it gives you is humility. And that humility allows you to have dignity as well. And when you think about what the economic presence means, it's more than just with each other. It is also with nature. And it says we need to give to nature first, so that it can give us something that is actually valuable to us. So what is it that we give to nature that is valuable to us to give, and nature give to us that's valuable to us? And I'd like to suggest that what we give is our hubris, the idea that we can fix everything ourselves. And what gives us is humility, the acceptance that actually we need nature. And when you do that, what you've done is you've gone back to the Garden of Eden. And that's what takes us now to nature's pace. How do we make all this happen? Well, I had a conversation with a man, an elderly gentleman who is a former minister in energy in sort of Pakistan, and he was telling me about here's how you describe a process by which you can do your projects and everything. And of course they work. It's very prescriptive, except in a world that we're going into where we don't know what will happen. Those prescriptive approaches are largely going to fail, because we're going to find that just when we need, things are going to change in a way that increases the cost. And just when we need a bit more money for the projects, that's when our budget's going to be cut. So nature space is the difference between how a beaver builds a dam and how we build a dam. If you think about how a beaver builds a dam, it goes along and it gnaws down one tree, a small tree, and when that falls down, it allows water to accumulate around it, and then all sorts of life accumulates around that. And that attracts fish along, and the beaver gets something to eat, which is kind of pretty cool. But what it does is actually is involving everyone along. So the beaver doesn't say, here's how it works. It allows everything else to come. So it's being half a step ahead. And all the things around it take one step, and they're now a half a step ahead. And so you have this constant interaction in tiny steps that goes on through. And the result of that is always a gain along the way. And if it is not, it's very easy to just find another path. And that's an emergent approach rather than a prescriptive approach. And that's what nature does. And in that way, when we think about going about our projects in that emergent approach, what it means is we may have an idea, but don't try to clarify it completely. Leave room, and plenty of room, for others to go and take it forward for you. And then you are not going to be walking on this alone. And that's how you can go back and have that economic presence, because you need others, and you need them to work with you, and you need you to be working with them. So those three pillars are knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And the knowledge is knowledge of ourselves, who we truly are. The understanding is that understanding of how we can turn that into a living. And the wisdom is this new wisdom of nature's pace, how we actually go about it. So I'm going to pause here and just invite you all to share between yourselves about, what did I say? How do you see these three pillars, kind of, will they be helping you at all in your work, your life, and your future in that way? Decisions and all those things. So the question is, how can we bring that about? And so my idea is a 6-step program that turns what I said before into tangible actions that we can do. And this 6-step program I call Thriving at Nature's Pace. And the first step is always the most important, and it's acceptance. And this is difficult because what this acceptance is to say, we may feel pain and we may feel hurt, and we may feel grief, and our emotions may be overwhelming us. And that's the consequence of worrying about what happens to climate change and all those things. And what it says is, accept that. And we may feel that actually it's all unjust. And it's not our fault. Other people have done this. And those people who should be doing something are not really pulling their weight. And the ones that we're relying on are leaving us. And what this says is, accept that. And that feels defeatist. It feels like, gosh, it's asking us to accept things that really we should be pushing back against and fighting it. And the reason for accepting it is actually the opposite. It's like accepting today is Thursday. It simply is. Until you can accept that today is Thursday, you'd wish always it was Tuesday or Wednesday. Those moments where you think, I just wish today was a weekend. I can have that extra thing. But the reality, it is not. So by accepting it, it makes it possible to take ourselves forward and say, tomorrow is Friday. That's what's possible. And acceptance is also the first step in a therapeutic method called DBT. And this is really important because DBT is devised for people who are so overwhelmed by the emotions, by the stress of everything around, that they literally cannot cope with being alive. And the acceptance allows them to develop the distress tolerance they need. To know that this is what it is, I can bear this because I can think forward about what tomorrow might be. And this acceptance is also the beginning of a prayer. It's called the Serenity Prayer. And it goes, Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. And give me the courage to change the things that I can. Which is the whole point. Until you can accept it, you cannot change the things that you can. And the wisdom to know the difference. And of course, that courage and wisdom is what we talked about. It is those three pillars. And we turn that into how we actually make those changes is exactly the economic presence. That allows us to have a new living in spite of the world being all very worrisome and all of those things. It allows us to really kind of allow what I would like to say is our true genius to shine. And that's the genius that connects ourselves with our economic presence. The way that we can nourish others so that they notice us and that we can then give us what we need and allow both of us to have that humility and that dignity. So how do we actually do that? Well, clearly this is something new, and clearly we have no idea how to do this. So it starts with humility to recognize that actually, you know what, I don't know how to do this. Which is why we want to do it, think of it as doing it in a laboratory. Because you have a laboratory to do experiments, and you have experiments because you don't know the outcome. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. And that means that what you do, everything that you do, is okay if it doesn't work out the way you think it might. Because that's how you actually discover which way the path can go. And that's the Thrive Lab. And the Thrive Lab is basically any project that we do, it can be that. It doesn't need any money. It doesn't need anything special about it. It simply is looking at the way in which we take our steps and considering it as being steps within a laboratory, our own laboratory in that way. And that means it can apply to any venture and anything that we want to try. And the final step is what I call a Thrive economy. We have to take this out into the big world. We can't just keep it to ourselves. And the reason for that is that the big world is going to come at us. And if we want to hide away, it's going to be like a juggernaut that's just run away and charging. It's much better if you're inside it and driving it. So that's why we have to take it to that big world. And that big world is a Thrive economy, and this is an emergent economy. It's one that we don't know the shape of yet, but we know that our efforts matter to it. And climate change becomes our ally, because it's opening up cracks in the prescriptive economy that we live under. And those cracks is where we'll be able to find our niche and actually develop our own Thrive Lab and our own kind of economic ventures. And eventually they percolate together between yourself, your friends, other people around, and that's how the Thrive economy comes about. So, how do you actually do that? Well, I thought, let's give it a go. And I created this conceptual thing called the Thrive Academy. And the Thrive Academy has no budget, has no money. The great thing about having no money is that anybody can be a party to it. If you try to go to a top university, it has a budget, which means that it has to draw the line and throw out most of the people that apply. But because it doesn't have any money, it's completely open. And the only thing that matters is your own commitment. And what's that commitment to? Essentially those 6 steps of thriving at nature's pace. And I want to describe some of the things that I'm going on. James, he comes from I didn't realize it would blow up like that. These are all LinkedIn photos, so they blow up like that. He comes from the northwest corner of Kenya. And he got in touch a couple of years back, and he was talking about how where he lived used to have water, and they don't have water anymore. So he used to be able to climb trees, and there are no trees anymore, or very few of them. And he wants to bring back that well-being that he had when he was young to the communities there and to the land there. And we tried different things, and they didn't work. And in reflection about it, and of course, this is the aspect of the Thrive Lab, and the reflection about it is that we'd always been very prescriptive. And the fact is, we tried to see if you can get a water container, it got delivered and it broke, and things like that. You just can't control it. And whereas here, you can get a refund, in the northwest of Kenya, you got no chance in that way. So we then started realizing, actually, the promise of water is not just our promise of water, it is about what other people think of. And so what we're now developing is an innovation lab, where people can pay for themselves to come and learn how to innovate and discover for themselves what that promise of water is for them. And what do we use as the basis, as the focal point of that, is the lack of water, their actual life. How much water they use, what happens to it, where does it go, how can you actually extend the life of that, what can you do to try? And all of those are steps towards innovation, are steps towards allowing each person to realize their own spiritual belonging, their own economic presence. And of course, everybody has busy lives, so it means that it doesn't work to any timetable. And that's nature space. And Samuel contacted me when US Aid cut all of its programs earlier last year. He lives in Naki Valley, which is a refugee camp in Uganda. It's 180,000 people. And I have no idea how he contacted me, but he contacted me in that way. And we got talking, we were wondering what it is. He comes from the Congo, and he says he wants to make Naki Valley his home. They've been displaced, they've had all the trauma and everything, but actually he feels like what he needs to do is to build a home. So we started this project of Naki Valley, our home. The UN Refugee Program has this thing of UN Refugee Fund, and it allows refugees themselves to come up with projects that gets funded by the UN. In 2024, there were 1,800 proposals. 20 were selected. That's what happens when you work with money. So what we said is, why don't we look at the proposal that you got rejected, and let's see whether we can make that work without money, without the funding. And that starts this complete change, and we had a conversation earlier today, trying to get ourselves to think and says, well, we need the field to be able to go somewhere, to the field in order to plant, but we don't have money for the field. So we started thinking, actually, what does that mean? Maybe it means we can partner with some other people who may be going along the way, hitchhike, or maybe I can actually say there is a business making bicycles or whatever it is that might come through. Or maybe we need to do it by doing something for someone else, because he's clearly very smart and very educated, and that will allow us to then go on to this. And because there is no money, and because we're willing to go about it in this very open, emergent way, it completely changes our minds about what is possible and what is not. And you need that if you're ever going to make anything into your home. Ashish is currently living in Canada, but he is from Nepal. And he was part of the rebuilding of Nepal after the 2015 earthquake. And he's a civil engineer, so he's very scientific in what he does. And he contacted me about the climate-friendly buildings. And we got talking, and it turns out that actually what he really wanted to talk about is a Hindu spirituality that extends to how we build buildings. And it's 5,000 years old, and it basically connects us with nature. And he's in Nepal at the top of the world. So if you've seen the Avengers, kind of Miss Doctor Strange and the bits where he goes up to Nepal, and it's literally kind of connecting to that energy up there. And he talks about energy all the time in that way, that flow of energy in the way it is. So we started thinking about what it means, and what we come to is that it's really buildings that fit us as people, that fit nature, that fit the world that we want in every way, and how we can actually balance that between that very spiritual perspective with the very scientific. And that's the opportunity that we think. And so we are now thinking, maybe we can devise something, like a little workshop and things, to give with people who are looking for homes. Actually, so that they know what to look for when they go around and says, I'm going to buy a house here. When you go in there, appreciate how you might feel about it, and actually buy the one that fits you. So that's buildings that fit. Uloy Law Society, Kaka. He's a Maasai warrior. He has these stories about when he was young, how he walked 150 kilometers, herding his animals along, fighting off the lions and those things. And he's a law student. He's a first-class kind of law student, about to graduate from University of Nairobi, the top university there. So he's really interested about justice, and most of all, he's interested about justice for his people, the Maasai. The thing about the Maasai is that with climate change, drought is basically killing their animals, and they're herders in that way. And then when the drought's finished, the rain comes down in pours, and it drowns the ones that survive. So it weakens their livelihood, and they're forced to sell land. And more recently, what's happened in addition is a lot of ecotourism, which basically use the Maasai name, give them back nothing, chase them off their land, and actually force them into even worse situation. And even more recently is a lot of the nature-based solutions, massive funds with billions and tens and hundreds of billions of dollars to deploy. And what they do is they try to find land that's cheap in order to regrow forests, improve soil. But what they do for the Maasai is it kicks them out. So what we're talking about, and that's really where his passion, every time we try to do something, it comes back to that. And so what we're trying to do, what we're doing is to say, how do we connect the Maasai people together with their spiritual belonging? How do we build an economic presence with them that is attached to the modern world, that allows them to maintain their traditions as teachers for the rest of us, to flip that table round? Because that's what we need if we're actually going to think about how we're going to thrive through climate change. We need to learn from the people who are facing the challenges, not learn from the ones in the Ivy Tower, universities and those places. They are not going to be the ones who are going to be able to teach us. And finally, we're always glad you came. Nico is a stand-up comedian, he's a podcaster. He came from Zimbabwe. He is the victim of one of the many forgotten genocides in the world. And he came as a refugee. It took a very long time, very arduous journey. And when we met, which was about a year and a half ago, and he was saying what he really wants is a new start. And we're all going to want that, because all the things that we cling on to, a lot of them are going to go away. And we're always going to be wanting that new start. And we're always glad you came. It certainly comes from Maria's here. My mum, who is 90, and Maria is in this singing group. And one of the songs we sing is a theme song from Cheers. And there's this line in it that says, we're always glad you came. And that's the aspect of a new start, to be in a place where we're always glad you came. And so what we're doing is creating a corporate team activity. And it uses comedy and it uses communication podcasting to approach difficult subjects. So if you're a team in a corporate situation, there are always situations where it's hard to talk about something. People get very defensive. And so this activity is to be able to build a team to be able to do that. And that's, we're always glad you came. And the way we do that is we use climate change as a difficult topic for them to talk about in that way. So if anyone wants to have a team building activity for good money, get in touch. So this is, in a sense, my spiritual belonging. And the interesting thing about it is I didn't seek out any of those people. Somehow they found me. And if anything, it's because I'm trying to do things without money, that I actually open myself to them when they actually talk to me. Because if I go back to my hedge fund days, it would be like, yeah, no, that project's not going to work. No, that's not going to work. And then you'd be turning it away. And so, does it work? Well, it's taking me to where I am, and it's actually giving me a lot more excitement and energy about the future. It's made me really optimistic about climate change and what it can mean. So I think that's something to think about in that way. And the most important part of it is that this Thrive Academy costs nothing. And it works because we don't put money to it. It doesn't mean that the ventures eventually don't need money or whatever. And because it has no money, we have to be incredibly practical about what we're doing. Because everybody has busy lives, and if it doesn't produce some sort of result along the way, it's not going to last. And that's very different from trying to plan a big project where you have all these steps and you hope that it all works out. And with climate change, things are going to be very, very unpredictable. And it will make a lot of those projects fail. And that's where we get into this sense of crisis. But if you allow the future to emerge with you being in the center of it and feeling that you actually have that agency to drive it, then you will find that there are places for you. I realized that investing, because it was all take from our planet and from nature, was actually destroying the future we're trying to create. And that left everything in a blank as to what to do. And the issue then was, well, if we're going to go and do something different, like return oil and gas and coal to nature in that way, which is what the climate mantra has been for some time in that sense, although they say it a bit differently, keep it in the ground, which is a very similar sort of thing practically, is we need to be convinced we can do that we actually are going to be able to have a place for us, even if that happens. And that's our biggest challenge and our biggest fear, is that if we do something like that, we're going to be left destitute and alone. There won't be anyone there to look after us. So the whole thing about the two sections before is actually to say, where can we draw the understanding whether we actually have a place? And actually here are some of the people doing things in places where they don't have anything in that way. But they have some of the most excitement about their future. They're the most enthusiastic about the prospect ahead. When we look at it and we tend to think, oh, those are terrible situations, they look at it from where they are and they think the world is ours in that way. And this goes into this last part over here about how do we take this to that thriving economy and how do we return that oil and gas and coal to nature? And importantly, what does it actually mean to do that? Because if we don't think about that, we're going to end up repeating the same exercises that we've been through in these past 300 years that we've been using them. So, mending our broken relationship with nature. And this is really the story of the prodigal son. And in the story of the prodigal son, the father has two sons, and the younger one is like, I can do everything. Why don't you give me my inheritance now, and I can go and take it, and I can create all these things as possible. And so his father does, and he goes off, and it didn't quite work out, and in the end he's destitute, and in desperation he comes back. The older brother who stayed with father is now angry, and he says, he's already taken his part, now he comes back, he's going to be eating mine. What the hell is going on here? And he's angry with the brother, and he's angry with the father. Of course, the question of the story is, which brother are we? And the answer is we are both. We have all spent the planet, our inheritance, and that's just what it is. And we're now a little bit desperate about what to do. And we're also the older brother, because we're quite angry at the people who we think have done this. And we say, it's their fault. They're the one to blame. That's the cost of it that they need to do. And that's the situation that we are. But if we are going to mend our relationship to nature, what happens is that we have to create room for nature to be in our lives. And as long as we are so angry about all these things, or we actually are kind of keep thinking we can do all this stuff ourselves, then we have actually no room for nature at all. So we have to let go of something to create room. And what is it that we let go? We have to let go of our hubris. For the younger brother, it's the idea that I can do it. I can do this. I'm brilliant. That's that hubris. For the older brother, is that anger and the hubris of judging. You're the one who's got it wrong. You're the one who's done that. And we have to let go of those. But most of all, we have to let go of the hubris of the oil and gas and coal themselves. Why are they hubris? It's because they have given us tremendous knowledge. All of our science and technology and medicine would not have been possible without it. And we think we can change life and create everything. And maybe we can. And it's not saying we can't. But if we're actually going to mend a relationship with nature, it's like mending a relationship with your partner. It's no point saying, you know what, I'm going to take you out for dinner, but I'm still right. In that way. So we actually have to let go of that. And this then comes to this part. What does it mean to actually return it to nature? It only makes sense if we return it to receive something back. Otherwise, it's like nature is a charity case. We're just giving them the thing so that, it's like, they're destitute, we have to look after it. We have to manage the forest, and we do that. we're not actually thinking we're getting something back. We are actually thinking me again. So we're going to repeat all of that again. So we actually have to have something tangible back from nature for us to be able to say, we're not doing it for the sake of nature. We're doing it for the sake of our own relationship. Our relationship with nature, with creation, with all of our interactions, everything that there is. So that's why this idea came to be about receiving something back from nature. And what we receive back is a currency. The currency of a nature that's intact, that's abundant, that actually says we can trust nature, that we can thrive, that nature can provide for us. Now, if you go back into the day of the Bible at Genesis, and the thing about what happened was that, Adam and Eve ate the apple, and then they felt naked. The point about that is after that knowledge, they felt nature couldn't provide for them. So they needed to cover themselves. They need to do that themselves. Before that knowledge, that hubris of that knowledge, they never thought that nature couldn't provide for them. So what we need back from nature is that humility. And that makes a big change. So we give to nature our hubris, we receive back that humility. And we express that humility as a currency so that we can use it in our everyday transactions and remind us that what we're actually doing and giving back is making a covenant with nature that says we trust nature to provide for us. And so now we live in a world with two sorts of currencies. The currencies like the dollars and euros with a promise to pay you a pound of gold and those sort of things. And the currency from nature where we have this covenant that says we trust nature to provide for us. And someday we're going to need more of one, and someday we're going to need more of two. And that blends along together. And that allows us to recover a new relationship, that allows us to give back to nature the oil and gas and coal without it being something that's like me. So what can we give back? Well, every morning when you get up in the morning, you probably use a toothbrush, and the chances are that's made of some plastic, and that needs oil and gas and coal to produce. So that means that there are all the stuff that we need every day that we can't get rid of. So that's what I call block A, and we can't give those back. And then there's all the energy that we need in order to create the solar farms, the wind farms, and all the copper that needs to join them up in the cars or electric or whatever it is that you want to think about. And those are the block Bs, and we can't get rid of those. So that leaves everything else. And those are the block Cs. And there's a boundary between the block Bs and the block Cs. And that boundary is determined by how we think what it means to thrive, what it means to have that eudaimonic life, to have that purposeful life. There's a difference between having an extra beer fridge in your study or the high-speed rail link between Mumbai and Hanoi. That's the kind of choices that we are making along with that. And those block Cs, and identifying out those block Cs, are the things that we can return, and the knowledge that the world will always have a place for us, no matter how it is, tells us that we can draw that boundary wherever we want. It's entirely up to us, and it's our choice, individually, collectively, in that way. How can we do that? It's a map. And it's a map of a place called Santa Marta and a place called Cerrejón. And they're both in Colombia. And Santa Marta is the location of where in April, the 28th and 29th, they're going to hold the first conference on the roadmap on phasing out fossil fuels. And Cerrejón is where Colombia has its biggest coal mines. Colombia is the host of this conference. It is also the largest coal exporter in South America. And it has over 100 years of deposits left to export. So there's plenty of block Cs there. So this is then an opportunity. The opportunity comes and we can see what we can do with it. We have no idea how, maybe not. Well, it coincides, we're at this moment where we coincide with what's called the Great Wealth Transfer. And this is people like me, people in between the 60s and 80s, and they are the baby boomers. And they hold pretty much all the wealth in the world. And there's something like $150 trillion of investment money that is in their pensions, in their savings, and those sort of things. And that's being passed away as they age and pass away to their younger generations. So the younger generations are going to get this money and they can have the opportunity to decide what they want to do with it. And that makes a difference. So the idea here is what you can do is you can go along and say, let's have a investment education events, workshop events, targeting to these younger people who are going to receive it. Have that in parallel with the conference on phasing out oil and gas and coal. Where do you want to draw that boundary? And if you make these events into paid events so that they make a profit, and there are plenty of those things, people attend courses and education is like one of the biggest businesses in the world, then what you can do is you can go to the government of Colombia and says, why don't you be a profit-sharing partner in this? What we want from you is lumps of these coal in the Block Cs. We want you to give us the ownership, and we'll actually tie the ownership to the tickets to these events, so that the people who come and learn about it have the opportunity to say, I pass that, I return that ownership to nature for a Thrive coin. And then you can use those Thrive coin for materials you have, for, get a martini or whatever you want, and do those things. And you could probably persuade some of the businesses around to be able to use this as a currency as well. Now, if you do that, what you've done is you've taken one step in that being half a step ahead. And you've shown how the way we can invest our money changes things. And it can actually allow us to draw that boundary, each of us individually, so that it slowly comes up. I think of it as like an impressionist painting. Everyone does a little dot. And that changes investments. Investments at the moment is an investor with money. It goes ahead as investment opportunity, and that takes from our planet, and then that goes back into profit and goes into an investor. That's what happens at the moment. And that's the problem that we have. If you then allow the idea that we can profit share in this way with the owners of the Block Cs, well, who are these owners? These are governments. The oil, gas, and coal companies are the contractors to extract them. The actual ownership, by and large, belongs to governments. And what does it mean to be profit sharing with the government? Is to be sharing with our friends, our neighbors, and everybody. Because what is the government if it is not the people of the country, of the place they are? So now you're saying we're investing so that the profits are shared for everybody along in that way. And of course, you want your share too. You don't want to lose out on that. But actually it says there's a value that you want to place to these oil and gas and coal in the Block C that you want to keep and return to nature. And then, of course, if you then allow nature to come in, you now allow nature to be a sovereign. It's sovereign because it mints money. Back in the days of the Roman Empire when they mint money and those coins in that way. And you have now the situation that actually your investment is now bringing in not just other people, but it brings in nature. It heals all of our relationships together. And the thing about these coins is these coins are money, and money can be used by anyone. And when you use these coins, it doesn't matter what you do with it, you're still marking out the boundaries of the Block Bs and the Block Cs. So you're still limiting and giving that space back for nature. And that means that you don't have to be judged about what you do. You can be who you are truly. That goes back to our beginning. Our ability to lean into our spiritual belonging that can actually take us all the way to a new approach towards how we invest. That strengthens the way we can be that, provide financing out of that $100-odd trillion that's about to be passed through for everyone along. So, in my book, Thriving at Nature's Pace, I have this story in there, and a totally fictional story, and it's set in the near future. And when I wrote this, I was thinking about what might happen. And I set it as the UNFCCC, which is the international framework for dealing with climate change, is collapsing. America had left. Other countries have split out. Some have gone alone, like Colombia and Netherlands in that way. Some have gone to the US. Others are still trying to patch it up. And in the middle of all this, a young engineer working for a coal mine company in India is thinking, why don't we just sell the coal without digging them out? What's the point of going through all the palaver of doing that? And at that time, his sister is in a class in school, and they're learning about climate change, and they learned about people used to say, keep it in the ground. And they had this idea, why don't we buy some coal and keep it in the ground? And so they got into an arrangement, and they bought a ton of coal for 1,000 rupees, one-off price, only that. And then they printed T-shirts where they had the map of the coal, put a pin on it, and they printed on it, we kept it in the ground. And of course it went viral, and they made a killing selling T-shirts. It went so popular that the energy minister got involved, and he clamped down on it. And he was saying, national security, economic growth, you can't possibly do anything like this. And it went on and on and on for decades. Eventually he got old and retired. And the new energy minister came in, and she brought in her T-shirt, the original we kept in the ground, and she framed it and put it up. And the point of that story is very much that climate change is more than the greenhouse gases. And it's more than about the oil and gas and coal. It is about fundamentally our relationship with nature. And there is and that relationship is taking us to a new wisdom. And that new wisdom is that we can thrive better at nature's pace. So I want to finish off that last section here with this. How can we engage with the organizers of the Roadmap Conference and actually take that step?